Good morning, Kiki. But it's not looking like such a nice morning. No, it's blowing 35, 40 knots. I was just checking on the wind gauge there. Now it's down to 34. So yeah, not a good start to the day, but it looks like we're gonna have about 3 days of this. So just solid wind and rain. We got this big Beneteau swinging around beside me. He's a little bit lighter than we are, so he tosses around from side to side a lot. Damn. We can certainly do without the 50-knot gusts. Yeah, it's getting a little crazy out here. I'm pretty confident in the anchor. This is the kind of shit you just might want to start your engine. Just to have it running as a backup, just in case. Wow. Horizontal rain. Nasty. Completely whited out. Alright, well, engine's running. Got a little break in the gust. I gotta go grab a towel because the camera's getting wet. That's not good either. We already lost one camera. Oh, there's one good thing. We collect lots of water on days like this. And my tanks are almost full, so we don't need much more. But free showers is always a good thing. Another full one. Only took 5 minutes for that one. Cool. That's how true sailors take a shower in the rain. That's got to be cold. Oh man. Alright. Got it. This is a brand new water injection elbow we just put on the engine about a year and a half ago. Can't remember where I had it put on, who put it on. It was BVI's or St. Martin somewhere, but whoever put it on didn't put it on with the proper bolts. And these bolts were too short. And they go straight into the exhaust manifold, which of course is very hot, and this is a saltwater injection elbow. This is where the salt water from the cooling of the engine goes through and down discharges into the exhaust port and then out through the exhaust tube out the back of the boat. Well, these bolts are about 1/4 inch too short. This is a proper bolt there. That's one of the actual bolts. And this is the ones that were in there. They're more like studs. I'm not sure where they got these from, but you can see they're 1/4 inch too short. And if you look real careful, you can see that there's oxidization on the threads because these are steel bolts that are bolted into an aluminum block, aluminum head. So yeah, the exhaust manifold is aluminum, and you put dissimilar metals together and you get corrosion. Well, what happens when you get corrosion? The metal weakens, and we were using the engine the other day, and when I throttled up, of course, you get an abundance of pressure in the exhaust system, and the pressure, the bolts were just hanging at the last little bit of material in the threads, and it just literally blew the bolts out of the threads. So the threads are basically destroyed. The problem is, whoever installed these didn't put on a dissimilar metals compound, something like an anti-corrosion preventative. Had they done that, everything would have been fine. They'd still be there today, but you can see all the aluminum from my block is in the threads. See that? That's a lot of aluminum. That's all just corrosion, just from weakened metal, just because they didn't put a compound on it. So yeah, we have had a major problem now, and that means that some of the threads are stripped out of the block, but luckily it's only on the two short screws, bolts, so I need to see if I can find two of these longer bolts and use them the proper size. So that's what we got to do, and of course when it separated, it completely destroyed the gasket, and that's a high temperature gasket, so where am I going to find that on this island? I have no idea, but it is destroyed completely. So we were getting exhaust fumes through the boat like crazy. You can see the whole side of the engine is just covered with black exhaust. And that's because we were in the middle of motoring and had to continue motoring to get where we needed to go, and there was smoke pouring into the boat. So a lot of fun. Not. Anyway, I'm going to have to take this down to one of the chandleries and see if I can get some kind of material to improvise a gasket, and see if I can get some more bolts. And then we got to clean out what threads that are left inside the exhaust manifold, get any corrosion that's left in there out, and try and put it all back together, and hopefully not have any more exhaust leaks and not have it blow apart on us. So welcome to today's project. Okay, so just got back from the marine supply shop, brought in my parts, and I think I found enough stuff to put this thing back together. They had the bolts, so that was pretty lucky. So I got 4 new bolts to bolt it together with, all stainless. And then of course the important part is to make sure that we don't have the same exact problem happen again. So these bolts are a little longer, which is good. They'll tap into some new threads. But then we need something to prevent corrosion between the stainless steel and the aluminum head material. So that's where this stuff here comes in. That's called Tef Gel, and it's expensive. This little tube is about $20 US, but this is a coating that you put on the bolts as you're putting them in, and when you have dissimilar metals like steel or stainless steel and aluminum, it'll prevent any corrosion between the two metals so that we don't wear out the threads further than what they already are. So we got that. And then the next biggest problem, of course, was going to be replacing the gasket. I didn't want to get a compound because this is going to be very high heat application, and of course it has exhaust going through there as well, and most compounds won't tolerate that kind of fumes or heat. So they did have some gasket material. I had to buy a whole roll of it, unfortunately, which was about $40 US for this piece. But this is a carbon graphite, so meant for very high heat, you know, still compresses. It will still do the job, and it won't melt or blow out or dissolve or anything like that. So that's the first thing we got to do now, and basically just going to draw out a new gasket. So all we're going to do is just lay this thing out on the gasket material, and just take my marker and just kind of draw around where it needs to be cut. Cut out the rough square first, just so I can get it off of the big roll. And then we just trim just to the inside of the line that I cut out, or that I drew. There we go. Okay, so that's our basic form factor there. And that sits on there just like so. Okay, so we got the basic form here. I've just cut out a small hole in the middle just to give us some place to start, where I'll start incisioning out and cutting out the inner diameter once we get this locked into place. Right now we're just putting in the holes. So we need to line up holes, so basically I'm just lining up the gasket and sitting it down using our trusty pizza box as a cutting template. that, so I can drop that through there. And that will keep the gasket in place while we cut out the rest. I'm just kind of pressing the blade up against the inside edge and just whittling it out. Okay, not going to be as perfect as a manufactured gasket, but it will do the job. Okay, so the final step is just preparing the surface before we actually install the gasket. You want to make sure that the surface is smooth as possible. So I'm just taking off all that final bit of corrosion and the last pieces of gasket, just using 100 grit sandpaper and polishing it all up until it's nice and smooth. And then I'll do the same thing to the mating surface at the engine, which is the exhaust manifold itself, just to make sure there's no pieces up there as well. Because if there's any pieces, those are potential leaking spots, and that means we'd still have exhaust leaking even with the new gasket. Okay, so we've got our new bolts and the tough gel, and basically all we're doing is just coating the threads all the way around the front of the bolt. So there's a good amount of tough gel in there. Okay, so that's going right in here. Here's the last bolt there. Just spin it in. Let the tough gel work its way into the threads. You can see it's gone down inside. And we're just going to tighten up those 4 bolts on top first with the ratchet. Important for these to have good pressure on them as well, because this is still the top side of the exhaust manifold. So now, we'll take our longest bolts and we're going to clean those threads up nice. Get any corrosion out of those. We wanted the longest ones for underneath to hold the injection elbow on. So we're going to clean these up and then we'll put our tough gel on those and mount the piece. Okay, that's the last bolt. Oh. So what's that? You want to go sailing, you say? Are you sure? So this is part of the job. But we've got the manifold back on. You can see it right there. We've got the water injection hose back on. The bolts are in. And you can just see a little bit of the tough gel just starting to ooze out the sides there from the tension. So everything is holding good. The bolts are all in and tight. So we've cleaned out all the threads, put in the longer bolts, and now all that's left is to hook that up, which is the exhaust tube itself. And that goes back to the water lift muffler that you maybe can see behind there, but it's going to go right on this tube here, which I've already sanded and prepared just to get any corrosion off that as well. And that's the important thing. Just make sure you get as much corrosion off it as possible. Everything's got to be clean. You want a good clean surface when you put everything back together. So now we just got to remount the muffler, retighten all the hose clamps, and then give her a test, and hopefully there's no leaks, exhaust, water, or otherwise. No leaks, no fumes, no exhaust, no water. So, looks like we nailed it.